I think everybody knows at the Spring ULI every year we do invite in a CEO outside of the real estate industry. And I remember the first time that Brad and I talked, he said, well, I don't know anything about real estate. What do you want me to show up for? That's true. And we purposely invite Brad and others kind of around the country to talk about the concept of leadership. So we try to get outside of our box, learn about new industries, learn lessons learned, both probably good and bad anyway, from the CEO involved. So with that, I want to thank you, Brad, for taking the time to do this.
Thanks very much.
And I think what we'll do is start maybe with a couple of general questions, maybe on the industry, the company. Dare I go too far into the political realm, which I probably won't. And then we'll talk a little bit about leadership. And it's interesting, as you all heard, for those of you who are accountants and CFOs, there obviously is a path to the top. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing for sure. So, but Brad, why don't we start with this? Why don't you talk a little bit about, the evolution of Alaska Air? Obviously you've been there a long time. And
happy to, Bill. And like you, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. Clyde, I don't know where you are now, but 1,000,000 miles is a lot of miles. And I think he said it was like 1,100 or 1,200 segments. That's a ton of flying. So really appreciate your support and all the great things you're doing for this community and others. But yeah, it's as most of you will have watched, the airline industry it's actually a very interesting business. One of my favorite quotes about the industry came from Warren Buffett. And I think as of 2 or 3 years ago, we had negative retained earnings. So if you added all the airlines in all the years, the result was a net loss. So Buffett said, if an investor, if a capitalist had known what was going to happen when the Wright brothers took off at Kitty Hawk, he would have shot him down, because that's what airlines have done for our owners over our 100 years. But I think things are getting better. The last decade, as people saw, there was a time period when there was a 70% chance that the seat you were sitting in was flown by a bankrupt airline. But that's a necessary part of sort of cleansing and getting the system more healthy, getting the balance sheets in shape, getting the cost structures more appropriate given the fares that people were willing to pay. So we're sort of optimistic about the industry today. The Alaska story, and we're kind of an interesting airline. If you're from Seattle, you probably know the Alaska story well. If you're from Raleigh, maybe less well. But we've been around for 85 years, started as a little company flying a 3-seat Stinson and from Anchorage to Bristol Bay. We've been headquartered in Seattle since 1954, something like that. But it's honestly, I've been honored to be there most of the time, not as a leader. It's a great company, great bones, great values. We sort of believe in doing the right thing for the community and customers, and we're also a high growth airline. We're sort of while the industry's sort of ekes along, maybe it grows at the rate of GDP. Alaska's grown at 7 or 8% a year for 20 years now, so that's been a fun part of our story as well.
Mm-hmm. As you've kind of climbed the ladder to the top, talk a little bit about some of the greatest successes the airline's had.
I think there's the airline business. And again, I sort of feel like there might be people in Seattle will know some of this stuff, or Portland or Anchorage or Bend, Oregon. Others may not know the company as well, but there are a lot of successes. The airline humbles you as well. Every single day, you are humbled in one fashion or another in this business. But I think one of our big successes was not filing for bankruptcy. We started in 1932. Every other airline that started in a regulated era, and the industry was highly regulated, fares, routes, all of that prior to 1979. Every other airline that sort of built up a cost structure under regulation filed for bankruptcy. We didn't. We went, and you've got aircraft debt, you've got leases, you've got complicated relations with labor groups, unionized labor groups. All of that stuff we restructured on our own. And at the time, we said, well, maybe we didn't file for bankruptcy. Maybe those guys got a little bit more than we got. But we did it ourselves. And I think it turned out that doing it yourself and having the muscle and confidence that comes from doing it yourself is way bigger than that last 1% or something like that, if you know what I mean.
Right. And what was the rationale behind purposely not declaring bankruptcy? Anything in particular?
We were never, I think we always wanted to control, we wanted to control our own destiny and not, and we were actually never we were very worried about it,
right.
But we were never at that place. But we fought hard to not get to that place because we wanted to be in control of ourselves. We didn't want someone else to be in control.
Mm-hmm. And what about the obverse side of the coin, some of the failures? I'm sure there aren't too many.
Oh, it's, well, some know the company had a bad accident 17 years ago, which you learn about. You learn about every single moment as a leader. You've got to speak about your commitment to operating safely. You've got to speak about people knowing their job, because running safely comes from the right culture, the right tone. It comes from well-defined processes. It comes from everybody knowing their job. If I've got to push back an airplane, fly an approach, fix a jet engine, I've got to not only sort of say the right things, but you've got to be well-trained. And you've got to have a culture where people can stand up and say, look, I don't feel quite right about this. Can I have more information, more instruction, whatever it might be? So that was a big learning for us. 2005, I apologize to Seattle customers if we haven't got you your bag yet, but 2005 was...
Since 2005?
I was just saying, 2005 was a tough time in the industry, and we restructured ourselves. And part of that was we got the cost down, and then the operation went... It was bad for a while, and we had some late bags there in 2005.
I thought American Airlines was bad.
But then you learn from it. You would sort of say, well, okay, well then now we're running on time, we're getting our bag on time. So then we say people don't know that we're delivering bags on time yet. So we came up with this idea. Let's guarantee. Like who wants a bag guarantee? But we said we guarantee your bag will be there in 20 minutes, and we've had that in place for 6-7 years now, and it actually. We get the bag, our team is motivated by that, but also it changes people's perception. They say, okay, it's a reliable airline. I can trust these guys.
Right. I don't know how many people actually know the story of what Alaska Air went through with the accident. I think it would be interesting to kind of share what happened, how the company reacted. I mean, we had a situation in Chicago not too long ago that I think a lot of people feel that airline might not have handled things quite as well as they should have.
Well, one thing you learned, there's a lot, and that's sort of going deep into the bowels of the company, but I think one thing we learned is that when bad things happen, you apologize completely and you apologize quickly and commit yourself to being as good as you can possibly be on whatever it is. If it's a maintenance issue, flight, operations, the food on the airplane, whatever it is, if you apologize quickly and completely, it's sort of, and then you commit to being as good as you can be, it diffuses the situation. And some of the Seattle folks would know, I mean, the Seattle media was after us for a year or two, maybe 12, 18 months. And then we learned something, we said, okay, this is on us. We fly the airplanes. You can talk about other people that might have contributed, but to our customers, this is on us. And once we took that position, things got way better. Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about your vision of the industry. Is there going to be further consolidation? Obviously, it sounds like the financial future is, at least for now, reasonably positive. But what's your view?
I mean, I'm trying to think of parallels that do happen between real estate and our business, but it's very supply sensitive, the business. So if there are too many seats in the market, the conditions will be tough. So I think having these bankruptcies, having the consolidations, there's different people leading most of the U.S. airlines, so people are they're more informed, more thoughtful about how much capacity to put into the market. That's better. That means conditions for airlines to operate profitably are going to be better. So you asked something else, Bill. Did I fully answer your question? Industry conditions.
You talked more about the industry and consolidation, the future, and you'd said there's a parallel to real estate. I mean, we never overbuild, so
no, good.
There's always a good capacity.
Well, that was back in the day. That was the air. I don't know how you guys answer that, but back in the day, you guys.
Do you want the truth, or do you want how the industry would?
No,
answer?
let's make it sound nice. No, but back in the day, you can remember it that airlines made a little bit of money. Everyone got full of confidence and animal spirits. We went and bought a bunch of airplanes. Takes a few years for the airplanes to get built and get delivered. Then they come, and then there's way too many seats in the market, and you could sort of, these big 10-year cycles, and one really good thing about the industry is the cycles are shorter and tighter. This is my Pollyanna belief, but I think a lot of people actually share the belief. I think we'll always be, we're long cycle, capital intensive, but I think the cycles the depths might be not as bad as they were back in the days.
I think there are more parallels to the real estate industry.
Good, I hope so.
You may give it credit for sure. Tell everybody a little bit about the Virgin Atlantic.
Yeah.
acquisition, and is that the first corporate acquisition you all have did at the time? Anyway?
It is the first one for all of us. So we bought Horizon Air and Jet America in 1986 and 1987, but that's a while ago. So for this leadership team, this is totally new. And a little bit of the thinking there was the industry has consolidated. It used to take 9 airlines to make 80% of the pie. Today it takes 4. In American, United, Delta, Southwest, they've got 85% of the pie. And we're proud of what we do at Alaska, and we sort of want to be around 20, 30, 40 years from now. We just said, given how much the industry's consolidated, it's not required, but it would be better if we were bigger. And so then we just looked down the West Coast and we said, we fly to 35 states and 118 cities, but we're not as big in California as we could be. And so we've got Alaska, and airlines are interesting. We fly all over, but if we're honest with ourselves, we probably really have loyalty in Alaska, Washington, and Oregon. And so we said, let's go buy Virgin America to get real loyalty in California. And Virgin, we fly to 13 cities in California, but mainly it's the end of a spoke. Virgin flies to a lot of places out of SFO. They fly to all 10 of the top 10 cities out of SFO. They fly to a lot of places out of LAX. So it gives us a shot of building that loyalty in the origin, not in the destination. That makes sense. That's how we think. We say build loyalty in the origin, do the right thing, get them in your mileage plan, get them people like Clyde, get them in your credit card, then start to add routes, and then hopefully you make it work.
And when you look at that acquisition, what were some of the biggest challenges?
It was a lot of money. That's something that I bet you guys do deal with. JetBlue got it. JetBlue came. It was totally. We started it. We'd actually worked on another idea that didn't pan out. We started that. It must have been the fall of 15. We were sort of the only bidder for months. And it was one of the things I learned, and I think I've said this publicly, but had we paid a little bit more earlier, we might not have ended up in an auction process. We just sort of thought we'd wait a little bit, and JetBlue got interested. And so I always thank their CEO, Robin Hayes, for helping Alaska realize the full value of Virgin America. M&A is new for us. We're basically 12 months into it now. We're sort of, honestly, when the company used its balance sheet to buy another airline, our employees were totally jazzed. They were as high as you could be. And then now we're 13, 14 months into it. And so I think we're here. I think we're on the way up. But we're in the place now where there's just an enormous amount of work. And we've got Airbus airplanes now. We've got to make training programs common, customer programs common. There's 22 airports that we got to merge operations in. We got union agreements that have to be common, computer systems, ticket stock. It's just an enormous amount of work that our people are working on now.
Well, you can learn one thing from the real estate industry. Next time you do a deal, just lever it up a little bit more.
Gotcha. Okay, fair enough.
That'll work for sure. Brad, we live in a world of a lot of uncertainty, and it's coming from every direction. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of leaders in the audience worry about how to run a business in times like this. How much do you really worry about the stuff you really can't control versus the stuff that you can control?
Yeah. And Bill he did me a favor and told me what he was going to ask. He sent this early. And
well, there are a couple coming that you haven't seen.
Yeah, this is good. It's a great question. And I want to credit my predecessor, a guy by the name of Bill Ayer, when everything was in our industry, airlines were filing for bankruptcy, lots and lots of problems. He just sort of helped us see this notion of focusing on what you can control, and you have to train yourself to not get distracted by what you can't control. And here's an example in our business, and you all can decide if this is applicable or not, but if I look at my phone in the morning and the stock is up or down, there's a 95% chance that it's up or down due to something that we didn't do. Another airline released revenue results and they were positive, or fuel prices are up, or fuel prices are down, or there's a travel ban, or something like that. All those, the macroeconomic, bird flu, all these things affect your stock price on the day. If you look at your stock price over 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, it's none of those things. I mean, if the environment's good, the whole industry will be doing well, but I think your performance as a company is almost entirely due to, do you have low fares? Do people like to fly on you? Are your employees engaged in offering good service? So we've really tried to train ourselves to, I used to know all about the marginal cost of oil production and sort of have a theory on all that stuff, and I don't. We hedge fuel, and that's what I deal with now. And I sort of trained myself to not read those articles. I trained myself to focus on keeping us safe and on time and spending time with our employees, great service, low fares, things that we have to deliver on. And honestly, I'll credit Bill Ayer for sort of helping the company realize that. But it's been a really good learning for us. That one I think in your world, you want to. I don't know. If I'm building a building, I sort of want to look outside at the economy and things like that. But we don't have any. We're an operating company. We've got to run the airline every day, and so that model works for us.
Right. Let's segue into the whole notion of leadership, if we can, for a couple of minutes. You held what, 5, 6, 7 different positions with the company over time. What would you say you learned as you were kind of ascending in the organization? What are the lessons you learned? It's
interesting. I came up a finance track, but I would say it's funny. I have had different job titles. My job actually hasn't changed that much. I think the thing that we do as leaders is help people understand what the company needs to do to be successful. I think being in the airline business, where airlines were filing for bankruptcy because they were losing money, it helped to sort of know the way the place was wired economically. But that's not the job. The job is figuring out the strategy, figuring out where the business is, what's happening in the outside world, what do you need to do with your business to position it for success. And then the hardest thing is getting people there. It's not, I don't know, I think a lot of people, a lot of companies can figure out the strategy, but can you move in our case, we got 20,000 employees we got to move, we got a board of directors, we got analysts, people, supporters of the company. You got to get people aligned around where you want to go. And that's the hardest thing, and that's actually, I don't know if I've learned that, to answer your question directly, I don't know if I've learned that well or not, but I have spent a lot of time trying to get people aligned and sort of moving in a place that we think would be beneficial for the company.
And is there a benefit in the industry to coming up that financial track? You'd think that a lot of people who ascended that top position might be more consumer marketing oriented.
Sure.
Are there pluses and minuses to that?
I think there are pluses. I've always, I'm a pilot. I love flying little airplanes on the weekend. I always sort of wish I'd come into operations as a pilot or as a ramp service agent or somebody that actually knew what was going on the inside of Sabre, and I could fix your ticketing problem for you. But you come in where you come in, and this was the hand I was dealt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're one of those, I haven't tracked the numbers, but you're probably one of the smaller set of CEOs who literally grew up in the same company and became CEO. What are the advantages and disadvantages to something like that? You know, you worry about a company becoming too insular.
Yeah.
And suffering from maybe not knowing what's going on in the market, whatever.
So I think there are disadvantages to sort of growing up in-house. One of the things that has helped, well, it helped me a lot. I did an MBA with the University of Washington between 1995 and 1997, and just every weekend, even if we were doing an accounting problem, it was a case study of John Deere or Boeing or something. But getting outside I'm with you on that. It's really, really valuable. The flip side is you're able to demonstrate to people that you care about the company, you're invested, you're all in, you're tenacious, you're going to be there thick and thin. Yeah. Those are things that offset. But I will tell you, as I look at new executives for the company, I look for both. I see parts of our company where we need fresh thinking. We need to not look at this like an airline looks at it. We need to look at it from a customer perspective, and we might not be doing that good of a job with that. So, I think you need both in a company. Is
there anything you kind of stay in tune with relative to, the outside world and so forth? Are there any things in particular you did in that regard? I know you sit on some outside boards and
I'll just say those experiences are really. We've all got a calendar to manage, and a lot of times I look on my calendar and I agreed to do something, and I was like, I shouldn't have done that. But then you go out there and you meet somebody and you talk to them about what's happening in their real estate business or sit on the board of Nordstrom, what's happening at Nordstrom or in another business. And that perspective, I don't know, I left the office and man, these problems are insurmountable. We're never going to get past them. And you come back to the office and said, oh yeah, I don't know, I've got a 40,000 foot perspective now. We're going to get through this. I can see so anyway, it's useful. Whatever you can do to get an outside lens is useful.
And we're kind of in a point in the world's kind of generational change where you've got the boomers that are starting to think about, kind of passing on the leadership torch to the next generation. How do you define success for your next generation of leadership in the company?
I think probably like everybody in the room, you want people that care about the company, that love the company, that want it to do well. They're sort of fully invested. They've got to be smart. And what I always say, they don't have to be Harvard, Stanford, smart, but they got to be smart enough to realize what's happening in front of them and sort of deal with it. You want people that have our values, and we're a company where our values are own safety, do the right thing, be kind-hearted, deliver performance, be remarkable. We want people that live those values. And this is one I say we sort of stumbled onto it. It just sort of happened at Alaska, and it's been magic. But people that they're ambitious for the company, not for themselves. That personal ambition can be sort of toxic. And, the person that's, I don't care if I go up or you go down, but we need some space between me and you. That's tough on a culture. And so we just happened to bring a group of people in at Alaska that work fantastically well together. And so now recognizing how good it is, we talk about it a lot and we say we want this to be part of our culture going forward.
And how do you get to the bottom of who those people are? I mean, how do you pick people who? You're almost infectious in your enthusiasm. I mean, how do you identify that?
So this is what you do, because I'm no good at this.
I'm not sure I am either. But
how do you do it? How do you do it?
Well, how do you do it? Can I get back to you on that?
Yeah. No problem.
Well, we have these PhDs in a corner, and they do all this assessment work and testing and whatever. But
it's hard. I mean, what you want to know is the stuff that you'll know a year later. That's what. So when I sit down in an interview, I'm really sort of focused on not how great does the resume look today or the person they want me to see today, but what am I going to believe a year from now? After you're in the job.
Now, do you look for certain experiences? I mean, you're an Eagle Scout. For instance, are there certain things you look for in somebody's background that?
One of the things I look for is that something in, and it could be anything, but you tell me if this is good or bad, but here's a couple things I do look for. One is life about more than them? Is there something going on that says life is about more than just them?
Yeah.
That's one thing. Here's another thing, and I don't know if this is even legal to screen for, but
in the state of New York, it probably is.
Probably
up here, it's probably okay.
I just think people that grew up in sort of a humble background and fought hard to get where they are, I think we've never been disappointed by those folks.
Yeah. What about your own succession? I mean, obviously you grew up a particular career track, and doesn't sound like you spent as much time in operations or marketing, whatever. As you're grooming the next generation of leadership, are you purposely trying to give people a broader functional view of the world?
Yeah, and that's a place that I'll just share. Well, maybe I might not share detail, but we're focusing a lot on that. But I would say we're getting a C-. But I do think getting people, bringing finance into the operation is super useful. Bringing the operation into finance is super useful. The customer lens, we're really excited about. We're going to be growing a substantial presence at JFK in New York.
Oh, are you?
The finance people would say no to that, so you need somebody in the room that sort of helps the finance people see the merits of that, see the logic of that. So to the extent you can get people from finance to marketing to ops to sort of the customer side of things, it's really good.
Mm-hmm. And are you focused now on your own succession?
It's not. I'm 56. It's not a significant focus, But I'm having a blast. We've got a great team. I think the thing that we do focus on is you've got to make sure that people that are there are enjoying themselves, they're challenged. We push people really, really hard, but you've got to also make sure they know how much you appreciate them and how important they are to the organization's success. If they, this is something my boss did for me, Bill. If they're not, I just told him. I mean, I told Bill I've gone to New York so many times to talk to Wall Street analysts. Can I do something else? He said, yeah, you could do something else now. You've paid your dues, and so anyway, he did that for me, and so I try to pay it forward in the same way.
And where did you get the passion for the culture? I mean, clearly, I have to tell you, having been in this business for probably longer than any human being should, you don't see a lot of people who started off as financial people who are just as powerful as you are about culture. And you can understand why Clyde's, flown 5, 6, 7 million miles, whatever. But where did that come from?
I don't know. One thing I'll tell you is I love flying independent. I learned to fly when I was 18 or 19, and I thought I would be. He mentioned that I was at Pricewaterhouse. I thought I would be an accountant forever, but when an airline called, and I didn't really know Alaska all that well. When an airline called, I wanted to be there.
Yeah.
It's what you tell a young person. Go do what you love.
So if I was to ask somebody who worked for you to characterize your leadership style, what do you think they'd say?
So we were actually talking to someone this morning, and I heard one of our officers articulate something. I hadn't heard that they actually believe this, but what he said is, look, the front line likes Brad. He drives the leadership hard, and
he drives the leadership hard.
I push them hard. Yeah, around our pilots and flight attendants and agents, I try to be positive and supportive and just say, what can we help you with? The leaders need to. A lot of people are. I don't know. A lot is riding on us being successful. You think about those airlines that filed for bankruptcy. We don't want to be one of those. So
right.
So there's intensity with the. It's not. I think we have an extraordinary amount of fun. We always, when we're getting ready for a board meeting, I always tell the board, I said, you can't believe how messy this was 4 days ago. But I will say that we push hard.
And in the airline industry, how critical is this whole concept of culture and attitude to the success of it?
You guys fly. I think you guys tell me, but I think when an airline fails, it's usually pretty dang simple, the failure. It's not a lack of choosing the right airplane or the right route or some exotic finance idea. It's usually that airline actually, it's this alignment thing. The people on the airplane actually aren't trying to do the same thing as the leaders of the company.
Right.
You wish it was more complicated than that, but I think it's that basic. So it's important.
And how do you drive that culture into the baggage handlers, the flight attendants, the people who are interfacing with those of us who fly every day?
And this gets to the humble. There are reminders of where you're not doing that every single day. Especially in a unionized environment, you see that. We came up with one program several years ago that we called it Flight Path, and we'd done all the cost reduction stuff of 2005, but people weren't that engaged yet, and so we realized we're spending millions of dollars on technical training for pilots and simulators and mechanics. How do you check in a customer? All that stuff. We're spending a lot of money, but nothing on the company's strategy or that sort of thing. So we came up with this program called Flight Path. We visited with our people in groups of 150. So at the time it was 80 groups, and they were proportionalized. So many pilots, so many flight attendants, on and on. And we started the session with, what are you proud of? And
who's we? You and
it was
the leadership?
It was not outsourced. It was the senior leaders of the company. It was
including you.
Yes, every single session. But we started with, what are you proud of? And I will tell you, out of 80, there was 3 sessions that they went for an hour on things they're proud of. And there were 5 sessions that there was nothing they were proud of. We went for an hour on things we were not proud of. And but the normal thing was it got them talking. And there was a lot of things they're proud of, but hey, I don't understand why you did this in 2005 or why you did this. And anyway, I think the bottom line of it is you start a conversation. And then we talked about culture. A lot of the success of an airline is how you operate on the ground. So we really defined for pilots, flight attendants, accounts payable, everyone. What does the ground turn process look like? And there was an iPad game they played. And then at the end, we answered some of the questions they put on the table in the morning. And then we said, here's where we're headed. And I think we also put up a slide that said at the time, 80-something% of our employees thought the company had an outstanding future, but only 50X%, 53, 54, 55, were sort of personally motivated by it. And so we just sort of said, hey, don't we have a problem, you know? More than 3/4 of you think we have a great future, but only half of you are working on it. And so we poked them a little bit. And,
what were the other half doing?
I know, and it's a fair question for all of us, but we basically said, here's where we want to go. Will you help us? And we said, if you're one of those people on the fence, think about it. I mean, do you really want to live your life being on the fence? Either get off the fence here, hopefully on the right side here at Alaska, or go do something where you can be enthusiastic if this isn't the right place.
Right. Now, you strike me as a person who probably doesn't like to fire a lot of people and dismiss a lot of people. Do you have to do that to keep the culture as passionate and forward-thinking as it is?
That gets to, I actually have done some of that. You know, it's, and you sort of have to come from a belief of what is best for. I sort of start with this is a highly, highly, highly competitive business. The norm for most airlines our size is to fail or be acquired. So there's a thin margin for error. And so then the second thing is what is best for the 20,000 people. And if the best thing is to have a different leader, you just sort of get yourself into that place where so ideally you're making good hiring decisions. You're not doing a lot of it, but you can't, if it needs to be done, you can't avoid it. You know, you've got to do what's right for your organization.
Right. And then as you grew up in the company, how did your leadership style evolve, change? Yeah. Was there a mentor? Was Bill, a key part of how you evolved?
He was. He showed extraordinary courage in a really difficult time. And I saw him get to these, we have to reorganize. I saw how the toll it took. But one of the things I have said is that I've always liked people, and so 25 years ago I was really nice to them, and now I demand a lot of them. But it's because you care about them, and you realize they can perform at a really high level. It's people have been important all the time. But we push a little hard, and candidly, one of our people told me this morning. They say, Brad, when you say thank you, just say thank you. Don't attach it to thank you, but blah, blah. It was fantastic advice. That was really, really good advice. But anyway, that's how I've gone from sort of not pushing hard to pushing hard when our company needs it.
Right. And you think about, where you've come from and where you are. How much do you worry about how much you're going to build on the success that you've achieved?
Yeah, I think it's about some of the Seattle folks would know, but we had a guy named Bruce Kennedy and Ron Cosgrave that took the company out of regulation and sort of made it a real airline that operated on time and great ads and great customers. Really, our customer service started with those guys. Bill, just an incredible legacy at the company. I think the deal is we're an $8 billion company today. We were a lot smaller, but what I really want to see is the company that's got the questions you're asking. It's got the right leaders. It's got the right setup. I think you want to be one of these people that when it is time to go, the company, the afterburners turned on and the thing took off, right?
Right.
You don't want it to say, oh my God, we missed that last guy. That can't be the legacy, I don't think.
Yeah. And as far as the growth then, other acquisitions are probably the only way you move the needle, right?
Yeah, we will keep growing organically. Our spending is, so our board meeting is actually starting this afternoon. We're spending $1 billion a year on
Your board meeting is starting this afternoon?
It is.
And you're here?
You wanted me here, so so anyway, we're spending a lot of money on new airplanes, and so we'll continue to grow a lot organically. I think other acquisitions are possible. A little of our mindset now is there is something about being on the West Coast, and we could become quite a large airline just doing the West Coast. But just to be really, really clear, when I say the West Coast, what I really mean is anywhere you live on the West Coast, we can take you anywhere you want to go. But we could spend a decade doing that well, and that might be the best use of our time and resources.
So a lot of good potential
Yeah.
there. So anyway, well, we just have a couple of minutes. I thought we'd turn it to the audience if anybody might have a question or two for Brad by chance.
Here's one.
I'm just curious, how do you push down information to the different levels of the company? Everyone understands on all hands
Yeah,
communication, everyone understands the department communication.
yeah.
How do you use communication to create a culture?
This question is, how do we push down information? How do we use communication to create a culture? And I mean, there's a lot of these questions. The question actually is better. This is something we struggle with. If you looked at our employee survey, our employees would say that their company could do a lot better with this. Some employees, they just like to hear information one-to-one. They like to hear it in a conversation. But a couple things that we have done that have been successful, we have an app on the iPhone that we call it Pulse. You keep your finger on the pulse of the company. And I'll just tell you, stories have become very short. They're very, the old stuff was, 2-3 pages of text, and now the story might be 6 or 8 sentences long, but it's, hey, here we're going to JFK, here's what we're going to do at JFK, and with like Instagram, lots of photos. That's one thing we've done successfully. Another thing we've done that some of us were nervous about, but it's worked well, is we are webcasting a lot more. We used to sort of really believe in going around Anchorage, Seattle, Portland, San Fran, LA, meeting with all of our people personally. And even then, a lot of them are out flying, they're doing things, so we've started doing a lot more webcasts. And so we'll have a meeting in Seattle, and it will be available for anybody anywhere in the company. But I'll just say it's an area that because it's not, to me, it's not just communication. You want to communicate in a way that they're engaged. They want you to help. They want to help you make JFK successful. That's what you're really after, and that's hard, and we're still working on it.
Connie?
Yes. Yeah. So are there, I think your name's Connie?
Yep.
She asked, what have we learned about the Virgin America culture?
She looks like a Connie, doesn't she?
Yes, you helped me. Are folks, many people here from the Bay Area? I mean, it is a younger culture. It's a more hip culture. They've got more flair, a little bit more irrelevance. Some of that, Seattle is a pretty hip town. I would say some of that is actually true of the Bay Area. There's a fantastic energy with people being down there that we've had a lot of fun with. Those are some of the things we've learned. And honestly, most of those things I just mentioned, we would like to infuse into the Alaska culture. The Alaska culture, and some from other parts would know it, but we run a good railroad, and so we want to do that, and customer service, and I think some of our operating capability and safety focus. I mean, that's some of the stuff that we would hope to infuse into Virgin.
Okay, we've been told to wrap it up, as it says, but maybe one more question, then we'll stop.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to give you some customer feedback because I flew up here yesterday. Las Vegas. And somebody on my flight complained about the food, and I got an email this morning giving me a $50 credit the next time I flew on Alaska Airlines because the flight attendant was so concerned that it wasn't up to the level that they sent the word out, and I immediately got feedback. I was almost embarrassed because I thought they thought I made the complaint. But I just wanted you to know that was something that is probably very unusual in the airline business, and I thought you'd like that feedback. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Well, that's a great way to wrap it up. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks very much, everybody.